Hi, I'm Rachel St. Germain. Welcome to Unmasked. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about how we can manage our emotions, particularly those that are uncomfortable, such as anxiety and grief. In this video, I'll be covering 4 main points. First, why it is so important for us to understand and accept and bring awareness to our feelings. Second, why it is so important to actually feel the feeling that we're actually feeling instead of jumping to that should be emotion or trying to grasp onto something that feels a little bit more comfortable. Number 3, I am going to be talking about how we can use our thoughts to stop our catastrophizing situation, scenario planning, and bring ourselves back to a more neutral place. And lastly, I'm going to talk about how we can use suffering as not something we need to get through, but rather something we can build meaning from and something that we can look at as an opportunity for growth. So first of all, why we need to understand what we're actually feeling. In my last video, I discussed the 5 stages of grief and coping through loss. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at that video, I encourage you to do so. But in that video, what I wanted to really drive home is that sometimes we don't know what's going on, and we need a little bit of help to try to understand what is going on inside of our internal worlds. And part of that, in order to do that, what's necessary is to name it, to tame it, so that we can release it. And the naming piece of this and the building awareness is so very important, because I think we often feel something, we don't really understand what it is, and we just want to get out of it. We just want to go on to that next phase of, happy. We want to get out of sad, we want to get out of anxiety or grief, and we just want to make our way to happy. But what is really important is, first of all, just not getting into the distraction or the numbing or trying to grasp for anything that can get us out of that feeling that doesn't feel so great. And instead to just sit down and name it. Get present with yourself and bring yourself back into that present moment and name what it is that you're feeling. Just by naming it, I'm sure you've heard the saying before, the name it to tame it. It really does. It tames it. By naming it, we say, this is what I'm feeling. And it kind of loses its power over you. An example of this, I was outside taking my dog Chloe out for a walk the other day. And I just felt myself being pulled toward my phone as she was sniffing she loves to sniff in the morning. As she's sniffing away, I just sensed this anger inside, oh my gosh, an angst to try to get her to do her business and let's get on with our lives. And I was ready to just snap at her at any moment that she was pulling or trying to take a beat or two longer than I thought she should be taking to do her business. And I realized, oh my gosh, bringing awareness to the fact that I felt so triggered, so easily I was so easily triggered by emotions into actually reacting and wanting to lash out in anger or some sort of other outburst, made me realize, oh my gosh, there is something going on. And when I really started to bring awareness to that fact, I started to actually think through, what is it that I'm actually feeling? And I realized through that, it wasn't just this angst of anxiety that I get so used to feeling these days, but also just this heaviness. I started to think as I was walking Chloe around the block, I brought awareness to maybe I don't want to be making her go through this potty time so quickly. Maybe let's just slow down, because what am I really rushing off to? It made me slow down and just think about, what am I actually thinking? And I entered into some prayer, and through that, God helped me see that I was sad. I was really, really sad. I had thought I was anxious and angry, but really I was sad. And when I said that, it just brought this weight off my shoulders. It was almost like this understanding brought me some relief. I acknowledged my sadness for how I wasn't able to do the things that I liked to do, how this social distancing had robbed me of the social interactions that I so cherish. And the, for instance, getting together with my friends and family members, and maybe being able to even take trips that I have planned later in the months to come. Just this sadness. And then I think a little bit of, I even noticed some guilt going on, because there is this feeling of, well, maybe I shouldn't be feeling this way. And just by naming it, it just released that power that it had over me. And so I just encourage you to bring back your power into the situation by naming the emotions that you're feeling. Because once we name them and we understand, here it is. Here is sadness. Okay, here you are. I'm going to feel you. It's almost like it doesn't have to shake us so much to try to get us to pay attention. It doesn't need to chase us. It just allows us to come in, feel it, and let it go. So in addition to the understanding and bringing awareness to our emotions, I think there's also this, what I wanted to point out is the fact that it's important to feel the feelings that we're actually feeling. I kind of just pointed out that in that moment with my grief and sadness and whatever, I started to feel a little bit guilty. And I realized I was judging my emotions, and I was thinking to myself subconsciously, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be thinking or feeling and thinking something else. And I think when we try to choose which emotions we should be feeling, it's kind of discounting how we really feel, and it's telling ourselves, I'm not allowed to feel how how I actually feel. I need to feel the right way. And friends, there's no right way to feel. The only right way, actually, if you want to put labels on things, the only right way is to feel and actually feel the feels. So I want to just encourage you, perhaps during this time, you may be feeling maybe some guilt over the grief that you feel. Like, oh my gosh, I don't deserve to feel so sad right now because there are people that are so much worse off than me. Or I should be grateful for all the things that I have, but really I'm feeling really sad about the things that I've lost. And there's a bazillion different things that can come up, and when there's judgment around our feelings, it's just disempowering, because it makes us feel like we have to have control over what we're actually allowing into our emotional space. And we're just human beings, that feelings come and go, and there's power in just letting us feel what we actually feel, because it's telling ourselves, like, I can feel whatever comes up. It doesn't mean that I have to attach meaning to it necessarily. I can sit here in my sadness and just be sad, but I can also, in the same space, hold space for trust and knowing that I'm sad right now, but I know that God is going to use this sadness to develop something in me. And I also know that sadness is temporary. It comes and goes. It's going to come and it's going to go. And I'm going to be happy at some times, and I'm going to be mad sometimes. And it just holds space for any kind of emotion to come through us. And really, that's what our emotions are trying to do, is just have us feel them and release out of us. Like, we can learn something from them, and we don't need to be controlled by them. So after the point about feeling the feels, what I wanted to also stress was that we can use the power of our thoughts to neutralize the situation, diffuse whatever catastrophizing thoughts are coming in, because our brains are kind of wired to look for dangers. I'll be touching on this in another video, but just very, 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 very elementary explanation is just that our brains are designed to search for threats, and they are designed to look for dangers so that they can keep us safe. So when we have a crisis like this, like the pandemic going on, our minds are scanning this world, trying to find reasons why we may be in danger. And in this situation, there is a real danger that's present. There's the healthy fear that kicks in our brains of caution, caution. There's a virus. It's very contagious. Your families aren't. To keep yourself safe, you need to take certain precautions. So there's this healthy amount of fear in us that says, okay, what can we do to keep myself and my family safe? I can wash my hands. I can do the social distancing. I can do certain things that are in my control to try to minimize my risk. That's helping keep us safe. However, our brains are a little bit wonky, and sometimes they like to just grasp onto more information, or thinking about, with the information piece, just thinking on what other information can I have? Because if I have more information, then I feel safe, because then I can plan. And then as we plan, we start to catastrophize in our minds, and we think of all these various scenarios of what could happen, and our minds are constantly grasping for ways that we could be in danger. But the problem is that they think about, they take these facts that are, yes, fact and truth. There's a virus, it's contagious, but it starts to spin all these other stories that go along with it. And it's the stories and the ruminating thoughts and the catastrophizing that causes us to feel so much anxiety. So what we can do is once we see these catastrophizing thoughts pop up, there is something, we're not helpless. We don't have to just let them continue going. What we can do is bring awareness to the fact that this is happening and say, okay, pause, I'm bringing myself to the present. I'm going to start doing what I know to do to bring myself to the present moment. I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to start noticing things around me. I like to do use the senses to kind of ground me back into my present moment, because the catastrophizing thoughts are always jumping me into the future. I start to look around. What can I see? What can I hear? What can I feel? What can I smell? Just start to name the things that are in your five senses. And then you'll just continue breathing and bringing yourself back into that present moment. The breath itself is just so grounding, because it releases this energy into our brains that basically calms us down. It calms our central nervous system down so that we don't feel physically so anxious anymore, and we can start to think more logically. So once we've brought awareness to the fact that our minds are going into a catastrophizing spiral of craziness, then we can ground ourselves in the present. And then at that point, when we can start to think more logically, we can use the power of neutralization to calm the situation down. What I mean by this is that let's think through, okay, neutrally and objectively, let's look at the catastrophized thoughts that we've been having, and let's list them out in our minds or on paper, however you want to do it, and then flip it. Start to say, okay, this is the worst case scenario that I can think of. How could I flip this to the very best case scenario? How would it feel like if that played out? And then we can go in between, just kind of something that's more in the middle of between the worst case and the best case, and just lay out all the various possibilities. And it shows our minds that, like, yeah, that catastrophized thought is one of many possibilities, but is not the only possibility. And just knowing that there are various ways this could actually play out just brings some comfort to our internal world. And not only that, but when we are neutralizing our thoughts and playing this out in that way, it's also training our brains that it doesn't get to tell us, like, this bad worst case scenario is what we're going to focus on. It's training us to see, like, that is one possibility, but we can rein it back in and say, okay, let's think neutrally. And it's telling our brains that we're not going to just automatically have to look for that worst case scenario, but to actually look for truth and to actually look for other possibilities. It just feels like so much freedom when we can just pull ourselves out of that loop and start to think through other possibilities. And then the last part that I wanted to cover in this video was just how we can bring meaning to our suffering. As we are going through this pandemic, it is very, very uncomfortable, and there is a lot of stuff that we don't really want to deal with. But I think we lose out if we just automatically try to get through it or cope, or try to distract away from the things that are going on and just wait out this pandemic and get on with life once it's back to normal. I think there is something that we can do in this grief, in this anxiety, to actually equip us to be better able to deal with hard situations in the future, and to realize that like these emotions that feel uncomfortable, they're not so tragic after all. We can show ourselves by putting these tools and implementing them into our everyday lives. It's showing us that we don't have to be dictated by our thoughts and our feelings, but it's also showing us that that it's okay to feel and think, that it's okay to feel the things that are actually going on that don't feel so great, because feelings are just feelings, and they come and they go. And if we allow them to come instead of trying to suppress them or run away from them, they don't chase us and start popping up in different ways. They just come and go, just like an emotional wave. Just think about I like to think about the beach, like the waves hitting, and emotion might come and crash over me and it feels really scary, but then I can just let it release and it just calms down and it smooths the sand. Maybe it builds up again and there's another one, but it's always this movement that we're never gonna get stuck in those uncomfortable feelings. And honestly, once you ride it, you get a little bit better at riding those waves. And the last thing was also the purpose behind the meaning. We can see that there are great things that God can use through these difficult situations to make us stronger, to show us that we can trust Him no matter what, that there are hard things that are going to happen, and we can't control that one way or another. So we can control instead how we react to the things that pop up. And by leaning into feeling our feelings, thinking the thoughts that are higher, and not letting the catastrophized thoughts rule us, we are so much stronger because of it. So friend, I just want to encourage you to really just bring understanding and awareness to whatever it is that you're feeling during this time, especially with this pandemic that's going on. Bring awareness to it. Really feel what you're feeling. Name it, tame it. Bring yourself into the present moment to be able to understand and identify, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? And then when you start to see yourself catastrophizing and being thrown into the throes of anxiety, start to just sit with those thoughts, bring yourself back to truth, name what is actually true, flip those catastrophized thoughts to something that's that opposite, and just list out the various other possibilities. So just start training your brain that yes, there are these catastrophic possibilities that could happen, but there are also these other ones that aren't so scary. And then with the meaning piece of it, it just really pulls it all together, because we see no matter what happens, even if the worst case scenarios happen, God is growing us through each and every moment, and He's with us. So we don't have to be afraid of these scary emotions or feelings and all that stuff, because really it's something that God can use to grow us. And the more that we lean into it, the more that we get used to really feeling our feelings and taking control over the thoughts that we're choosing to believe, it gets easier over time, and it isn't so hard. So friend, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will be talking to you again soon.